Carson City Library Board of Trustees being in order. I have to call the roll call, don't I?
You can ask, do we have, yeah, we do.
I do.
Back corner here to help call the roll.
Vice Chair Cranston,
Present.
Trustee Balderson,
Present.
Trustee Lucas,
Present.
Trustee Markle,
Present.
Trustee Nichols.
Present.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. First action, approve the minutes of the last board meeting.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Yeah.
we actually need to take public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, public comments first. Right. If anyone would like to make a public comment at this time.
Actually, if I may, Vice Chair Cranston, I do have public comment. Two items, Todd Colgrove for the record, speaking as a member of the public right now. We did not receive the Friends of the Carson City Library report in time to make the agenda and the official posting. So with your permission, I'll go ahead and read that into the public comment. As of July 22nd, 2021, July has been another banner month for donations to the bookstore. Weather did not keep the volunteers from working very hard to stock all the shelves and keep the store neat and tidy. To reward the hardworking, dedicated volunteers and show them our appreciation, plans are in the work for something special to happen in September. The volunteers would like to thank Vice President Joe Motorelli for his donation of the ice maker. It was much appreciated. Those who do a lot of their work outside are really thankful for shade shelter that was recently put up. It does not make it cooler air-wise, but it does make it seem cooler because the sun is not beating directly on you. We're still recommending that volunteers do not work outdoors midday. These next 2 weeks, the volunteers will be busy getting ready for a special combination author event and a book sale. Mark your calendar. Saturday, July 31st, we will have author Monica Marchenko, who wrote the book, I Want to Be an Elf. She will be inside the store signing books and talking about the Christmas elf from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. Meanwhile, outside in the parking lot, a children's book sale will be going on. Children's books will be 25 cents each for $5 or $1 cash only. This sale is from 9:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. and only applies to the books in the parking lot. Christmas in July, a good place to start your Christmas shopping. If you would like to be a part of all this hard work and special events, join the Friends of the Carson City Library today. And a second item that is not connected to the Friends directly, but I did just receive an email from the director of at the American Library Association asking me to remind and to share with my trustees tonight that there's a real push to get, if any of the trustees or any of the members of the public might be listening and are interested in helping build and repair America's libraries, they're really asking for some targeted 5 to 10 phone calls to two of Nevada's representatives, Representative Susie Lee and Representative Stephen Horsford. I'm proud to say that our representatives up here have already chimed in, but they're specifically asking that members of the public pick up their telephone and make their voice heard. If it is successful, by Monday, basically, if the Build America's Libraries Act funding is approved, Nevada would see an estimated $48.5 million to fix buildings, to expand buildings, to serve underserved communities in ways that are sorely needed. So thank you for indulging that public comment.
Thank you. If there's any other further public comment?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you. All right, seeing none, move on to item 3, approval of the previous board's minutes. Do I hear it? Does anyone have any changes to the minutes from last meeting?
Julie Balderson for the record. I do not have any changes. I just was curious if I could get real quick clarification on voting on approving these minutes from our legal counsel over here. I see that we have 2 new trustees, and just to clarify who can vote to approve previous minutes.
Thank you, Trustee Balderson. Jason Woodbury, District Attorney for the record. There is nothing legally prohibiting the two trustees who are not physically present for the previous meeting from voting on the minutes. For instance, if you had an opportunity to either be present or review a recording of the meeting and believe that the minutes accurately reflect what occurred in that meeting, you are certainly legally entitled to vote. If you did not have an opportunity to do that, or you're otherwise just not comfortable voting on the minutes, you would be permitted to abstain from this vote concerning the minutes.
Joy Holt, Department Business Manager for the record. I did notice that 3 of the managers' names are missing as present under the staff section. So Ms. Clusta, Ms. Louder, and Mr. Reinhardt are not listed as present.
Hi, Danielle Howard, Public Meetings Clerk for the record. That's something that I just carried on from the previous person who wrote the minutes. However, from this point on, I can go ahead and add their names. As staff, I always just include them in the minutes and reference them. But underneath staff, I can also include them.
That's a change we can make going forward. Yeah, I'm going to say previously, I don't actually remember seeing the staff's names listed on there. So, but it's not an issue. We can adjust it, or we can change it if you'd like.
Vice Chair Cranston, Todd Colgrove for the record. I would agree with you. I don't normally see staff recorded expressly in the minutes, although I would defer the question to District Attorney Woodbury if there's any legal reason we might want to have those reflected there. Although staff are critical and play a critical role in what we're doing, we actually don't have a say in what the board is doing. We're just here to inform the board.
I only mention it because my name's listed as staff, so I thought maybe everyone else got left off.
Jason Woodbury, District Attorney for the record. It is the pleasure of the board whether to include the names of all staff or none of the staff. I do agree with Ms. Holt. If some of the staff is included in the minutes for the sake of accuracy, it would be prudent to include them all, but it's not necessary for legal purposes to include them.
Do you have any strong feelings among board members
That's what I was
about
just about
this?
Maybe change going forward.
Yeah, going forward, I believe we should just, if we're going to list anyone of the staff, we shouldn't list them all.
So no edit on these minutes.
No.
Passes or approve as presented, but going forward, we'll make that note. Is that the idea there? I will make that motion if that's the idea there.
If everyone on the board is okay with that, I believe that if we're going to list staff, we need to list them all.
So did you want to edit the minutes in front of us to reflect that, or?
No.
No, okay.
Just moving forward.
Okay, I'll move to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Moving on to agenda 4. Possible action, discussion of the possible action regarding board officers. So we should be doing a yearly vote, I believe. I don't believe we've been doing a very good job with that. We've had the same chairperson pretty much continually since I've been here until Chairman Hayes resigned and then Chairman Long took over. So I believe starting from here going forward, we need to make sure we do a little bit of a better job with that. So we need to vote on who our new chairperson would be. Does anyone have any nominations? If no one on the board does, I do. I believe that Trustee Balderston would be best suited for the chairperson position. I'm content to remain in the vice chair position. I do not believe that my schedule and outside responsibilities would really make me an ideal chairperson. If I am allowed, am I allowed to make a nomination?
You are. Before proceeding to a vote, the nomination would need a second. And then I recommend that you call for any additional nominations. If there are no additional nominations, you can call for a vote on the chair.
I would second that nomination.
All right. Is there any additional nominations? All right. So all of the, sorry, we're going to hit your.
Just to clarify, you said two things, and so I'm real clear. These are two votes.
Yes, one's for
One is for
chair,
chair,
one's for vice chair.
one's
So
for
we'll
vice
we'll get the chair out of the way first, and then we'll do the vice chair position one.
Thank you.
So no other nominations for chair. I guess all in favor of Julie Balderson for chairperson of the library board.
Aye.
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 Okay, so congratulations
Thank you.
on the promotion.
And I would
All right.
like to nominate or suggest Nick Cranston remain vice chair.
Which I'm happy to do.
Any seconds?
I'll second that one as well.
I guess I'm still in charge here of this one, huh? So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 And then that motion carries as well. I will remain as vice chair. So congratulations, Chairperson Balderson.
Thank you.
So does that start now, or does it start next meeting?
Immediately, Jason Woodbury, District Attorney for the record. It's effective immediately, so you may pass the gavel.
Our poor dear introverted vice chair.
Yeah, I'm not
Thank you,
so
sir.
comfortable there, as you can
Yes.
tell.
That's okay. You did great.
I work IT.
We all certainly appreciate an introvert. All right, well, it looks like it takes care of agenda item 4A. If we could move on to agenda item 4B, presentation of length of service certificates to library employees.
Chair Balderson, Todd Goldgrove for the record, if I may interrupt. We spoke briefly, Vice Chair and I, before the meeting, and he had the suggestion that perhaps this item might be deferred until the end of the meeting so as not to interfere with board business. I defer to the board's.
So I made that suggestion because there's a presentation and there's some pictures that don't need to, but should take place, and it would just help with the flow of everything if we do that at the end.
Anyone else have strong feelings about moving this agenda item to the end of the meeting? All right, let's skip that one for now. Agenda item 4C, for possible action, discussion, and possible action to direct the library director to replace the banner currently on the exterior south-facing wall of the Carson City Library with a banner highlighting the national cover story article and the library's workforce development. Could we get a little more background from the director, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Todd Goldgrove, Library Director. I'll draw your attention to the reprint that's in your packet that has this cover picture on the front of it. There are two pieces of the discussion here. One of them is, if you've noticed the banner that's currently hanging on the side of the library building and has been for a number of years, it's starting to look a little faded and long in the tooth. And when our creative learning team's project with Think Bionics and the middle school students in Carson made national news on the cover of one of the most widely distributed library magazines, my first thought was, hey, that would be a pretty sweet cover on the side of the building and an opportunity to shine even more light on the good work that this team is doing. I wanted to bring it to the board's possible consideration, though, because it does have those two moving parts. One of them is removing a large exterior-facing piece of signage, and the second one is potentially drafting up some prototypes of replacements and bringing them back for the board's consideration to to make sure that we're sending out the message that we all believe we should be reinforcing.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members on this item?
So are we going to have a draft version of it next time, or are we using this printout in here as our draft?
Thank you, Trustee Lucas. That's an excellent point. What I'm suggesting, if the board is comfortable with our going forward with this in general broad terms, that I'll reach out to RAD, our folks that do the marketing, and draft up a couple of prototypes to get a sense of what we might want to do that helps underline that. I'll work, of course, with Chair Balderson indirectly to bring it into a couple of things that the board might consider, and we can decide, is it A or is it B? And for right now, I just will pass this precious one of the few magazines around. Because I'm just old school enough to be much more wowed by the actual magazine.
That's fair.
This is Beth Smarkle for the record. I agree. I walked into the library the other day and I looked at that banner again and I was thinking, I think it's time to replace it.
Might be time. So it sounds like there's two pieces here. One is removal of the old banner, which it sounds like we want to see happen regardless of whether or not a new one comes up, right? And then this part two is, I have to ask about cost.
What I was actually going to do, I'd ask about. We're going to get some quotes on prices and things like that we can review.
And those are excellent questions. Thank you for your input, Dr. and Trustee Markle and chairs and vice chairs Alderson and Cranston. The good news with all of this is that the library does have a large format printer and that is capable, to my knowledge, of printing on vinyl. I don't know that that's a path that we would go down, but it certainly does shave nickels and dimes off here and there. If we were to go down to a professional sign shop and get that printed, I would ballpark that to be somewhere in the somewhere between $500 and $1,000, certainly no more than that. And that would seem to me to be a reasonable amount as part of our PR campaign.
Do we, as staff, or did we print the old sign, or has it just been around long enough that no one knows?
Sorry, we did not. I don't recall where we might have got it made. It was definitely part of the advertising campaign involved with being a finalist for the 2018 National Medal from IMLS. I think it's considerably larger than the printer we might be capable of, and I don't know that we have the supplies on hand either to do that in-house, but I don't recall the vendor who it might have been. The one on the building is not vinyl. Well, it might be vinyl, but it's a sort of mesh material if you've looked at it. I'm not sure exactly what it is called, but it's much lighter.
I believe that we paid for that sign to be developed and manufactured by Nevada Momentum, which was the previous name of the current PR business that we use. So RAD was formerly Nevada Momentum.
Well, they bought the...
Right, so...
Yeah, so they did the design. They probably put it out to print. I don't know where they got it done.
I'm not sure, but
they would know.
I'm pretty sure that the printing cost was included in the overall cost that we paid Nevada Momentum, but I can look into that and get some confirmation on that.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth looking into doing it ourselves and having an outside source do it. That way, like you said, if there's a size limitation, if we can't print it quite as large, or if we want a bigger one, then at least we have those options.
I mean, additionally, I guess this might be tangential, but I like the idea of using library resources to make stuff that's around the library. It's just a nice little extra if folks notice whatever it is that we made, to say, yeah, we made that here. You could too. Even if it's not necessarily this particular project, but just go forward. I think it's a nice guiding principle anyway.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Cranston. I will certainly explore both sides and both options there and what might be possible, bringing that back with two options for the board's consideration.
So,
Sarah Nichols for the record. I just put my 2 cents in here. The Stewart Indian School and the Nevada Indian Commission actually make a lot of banners and a lot of signs, and we just made a couple of big ones for the new museum. And there are 2 companies in Carson City who have really, I want to say, competitive prices. So if we can't make it inside the library, because I do agree with the chair, it'd be nice if we did in the library, I don't think we should be scared of the cost, because I do know what the 2 normally run, and it's not huge.
so I'm not as familiar with procurement procedures for the city, but I would assume that if a contract for those type of services doesn't actually exist or we're not held to it, that we would want to get bids from multiple vendors, right? Is that?
We're not beholden to that process because it will likely be under a certain dollar amount.
Okay.
So, but it would be up to us, and it would also be up to us if we wanted to enter into a contractual agreement, because if it's under $5,000, the city doesn't require that. But sometimes we do that. We enter into a contract because we want to have that insurance that the contractor will follow through with their agreement with us. So, and certainly we could and would. Our process would be to get in touch with the city and find out who they've used in the past, and it would probably likely be. I'm sure RAD is one of their vendors, but yeah, certainly we would always go to the city and find out who their preferred vendors are.
Okay, and then in addition to that, it sounds like you might have potentially new vendors. So it's good to have options. Great, any other discussion on this item? I'm trying to think of what a possible action would be on this. Motion to direct the director to remove the existing banner.
You kind of brought this up, but would we'd be removing the old banner and disposing of it, or just taking it down for a while? Retiring it, or just taking it down and then putting it back up at a later date?
Todd Goldgrove, for the record, we would be taking the banner down. We might be able to find a place to store it. We could certainly put it in the building, in the unit that we have out at the city yard, should there be a need to bring it back. And I'd be more than happy to do that in the near term.
I don't know if we'd want to use it again. I think that's more of the question.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying, Vice Chair Cranston. It's a laudable thing to be a finalist for the national medal at the IMLS, but it is a very time-limited thing. And so I'm not sure that I can't imagine what might want us to bring it out again unless we were awarded it and we could say, look, we were here and now we're here.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to fly your championship flag if you haven't won in 20 years.
That's, yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's just sad at that point.
Can it be recycled? I wonder. Try to stay green.
Thank you, Chair Balders, and I will certainly look into that as a possibility. I believe as collection development manager Amy Lauder mentioned earlier, that the material that the banner is made out of is what would euphemistically be called a bus wrap, so that the air passes through it. And I believe that it can be recyclable, but I'll explore that while I'm getting the price quotes for the other material.
Great, and is this really a motion? Does this need to be a motion? Can this just be, we've had a discussion, you have some direction?
Jason Woodbury, District Attorney, in answer to that question, it's agendized for possible action. If you feel that you've had adequate communication with staff, that it's the board's pleasure whether it is formalized in a motion or not.
Thank you. So I'll leave it open to the rest of the board if anyone wants to make a motion. If not, you feel we've had clear enough communication, we can move on to the next agenda item. I see nodding heads. All right, let's move on to the next agenda item. That's item 5, information only, Library Director Representative Administrative Reports. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Todd Colgrove, Library Director, for the record. The first agenda item that we're focusing on is the presentation and discussion of the report concerning conditions of the city's FY budget, 101 gift fund 230 and grant funds 275. Each of the board members has had the opportunity to review those reports, and if there are any questions, I would be happy to entertain them and likely defer to Department Business Manager Joy Holt when they get sticky. But if there are any particular questions, and I would though underline how tickled I think we all can be at the new format of the reports, that they're legible, readable, they don't require a decoder ring to go from one point to the next, and they print out relatively immediately from within the city's system for tracking them. So we are much closer to a real-time reporting basis for the board's questions. And that I can't take any credit for. I will, again, defer to Department Business Manager Holt, who has worked extensively with the city's CFO to make sure that can happen.
So these numbers are as of June 30th. This is year end, then we're wrapped up? Or how does that work?
We are not. Those are as of June 30th. However, they don't include additional charges for purchase cards or things that came in so the city will officially close the books the second week of August.
Okay.
So we may continue to see expenses for fiscal 21 up until that point.
Okay.
Stay on. Sorry, I won't stay on. Sorry, Nichols. I have a really quick question, and this looks very nice. Do you have a list where you have everything encumbered?
You should see on there that there are some items encumbered. If you come from the right to the left, you'll see this percentage used, the remaining budget, and then the encumbrances. And those are those encumbrance numbers that you see down that list. Those are the only encumbrances we have.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are no other questions, I'll just, again, echo my gratitude that we have individuals on the board with such literacies to read these and be able to understand the questions and help us stay out of the weeds, because without that, very bad things happen. Madam Chair, shall I go on to item 5B?
If there's nothing else from the board, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Library Director's report in the first order of business, since I was unfortunately not able to be at this meeting last month, is to say welcome and thank you to each of our new trustees, and thank you to our ongoing trustees. This is some of the most important work. I've made no secret of the fact that I believe that some of the most important work that's being done in the country today is being done in the public library. That's why I'm here, and thank you for being here to help us accomplish that work. We're moving forward. But at the same time, I wanted to inform our new trustees of two things. The first one is Nevada Public Library Trustee Training, which you separately received an email from me with your logins, and you're able to get in. And although it's never fun to go back to school, there's an entire chapter of the Nevada Revised Statutes that's designed to help us in public libraries stay out of the weeds. And it's very easy to get in those weeds. And so if you have any questions with that training, any problems, it would be a delight. I believe also, correct me if I'm wrong, Joy, but you've also are working through that program at the same time. So we have a bit of a cohort here. So between myself and Joy and both of you, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us, because we can help sort through those issues right away in a way that doesn't require you turning to a fellow trustee and potentially getting us in other weeds as far as that goes. So I just wanted to again make sure that that's there and that you know that that's available. The second point is to let you know that we have put the paperwork through with IT, and you now each have carson.org email addresses. It's a matter of a separate question that I'll have to sort out. I haven't got the answer to it from within the city's policy, and I honestly haven't asked District Attorney Woodbury if there's a requirement that we conduct business using the city email addresses. But I would suggest that perhaps, even if there's not a requirement, it might be a really good idea, because to the extent that you as a trustee are using a private email address or a private cell phone or device to access any of the material that you're doing as you're doing the work of this public board, you're inadvertently exposing yourself to a public records request that might impound that device, or put your other email or messages in the public forum. And so we'll make sure that the new trustees have those email addresses, and we'll be sending the email addresses in the near term to both your private email address and your carson.org email address until you tell us to do otherwise, and we'll be happy to disconnect that. I don't know if that helps us stay out of the weeds, sir, or not, if we're already in the weeds by having sent the invitation.
Jason Woodbury, for the record, I actually could not have said it better myself. There is no legal requirement that you conduct city business, library board business utilizing the carson.org email address. But for the exact reason that Dr. Colgrove mentioned, public records requests, it's my strong recommendation that you do that. If you do happen to receive an email at your personal address, what we advise city officials to do is to just immediately forward that to your carson.org address, and then everything is captured and nobody has any reason to start combing through your emails for city business.
So if we receive them at both addresses but are very careful only to respond from the carson.org, are we okay leaving our private one on there just for view only?
You are okay, as long as it's duplicated on the carson.org address.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just writing.
Just add to that as well. For the new trustees, it's a lot easier. I don't know about, I won't speak for everybody, but for me personally, it's a lot easier to just keep track of things with separate inboxes. And one other thing too is Friends of Carson City Library has my personal email address, and I get their newsletters and things, and that's a nice separation to get the newsletters from the Friends and my personal email, and then board stuff stays with the carson.org. But that's just what works for me.
No, I try to keep all the board business through the carson.org email address. I do like getting the invites on my personal account because then it's in my calendar, but otherwise I don't utilize it. So putting it on the city's, email server, keep you out of trouble.
Thank you for that input. That's very valuable. I will make a point of revising it so that the invitations and that correspondence goes to both your personal and private. Now that we know that as long as it's duplicated in the carson.org address, we're good to go. And that will also include, just while we're at it, each of you should have also received the invitations to join this meeting via WebEx, if you preferred, with a panelist password. It's my understanding that should you need to attend this meeting or want to attend this meeting, that it would be an option legally. I don't know if that's something that we'll want to agendize for the board to consider at a future meeting, whether or not that participation is permissible.
Attendance remotely is permissible. The attendance can be either telephonic or both by video and audio transmission. The danger with that I will raise just to everybody's attention is if a board member chooses to attend remotely and there is some kind of technical glitch, that can be disruptive to the meeting. Because even if there's a quorum physically present, if a board member has elected to attend remotely, that board member has to be able to see and or hear the entire meeting. So if they're not, it's my obligation to advise the chair that that somebody's not, and it's in violation of the open meeting law to continue that meeting. But that's the only caveat. The open meeting law does allow that remote attendance.
And I think we see this more in statewide meetings where there's usually like a Las Vegas location and a somewhere in northern Nevada location, and it can be disruptive if that connection is not strong, and sometimes in old state buildings they're not very strong, and it does create some havoc. So that's our IT guy's life over here in his day job. I would just say one more piece about the public records request. So, if we could just take a what if scenario, especially for new trustees, if we do find ourselves the subject of a public records request regarding our business on the board, and it does appear that there might be responsive records that exist in a personal email inbox, those would be subject to share as a responsive record to the request, but not necessarily any personal email you've ever sent, right?
No, that's correct. Not personal emails are not subject to public records. The challenge with that becomes who gets to look through your emails to say this is library business, this is personal. And in theory, that could eventually be a court going through that and making those decisions. So that's why we try to avoid that altogether. But you're right. Your personal emails are not subject to a public records request.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I think we're still on your report, Director.
Yes, thank you, Chair Balderson. And just to wrap this up, I wanted to circle back and make sure that the board is aware of a number of things that are in motion that I'm actively working with Carson City HR in terms of addressing issues that we're seeing across the library and other departments are seeing across the city and departments across the state, frankly. We're all feeling a lot of stress and breakdown in communication. And in fact, that was raised in my evaluation nearly 2 months ago. And so I wanted to make sure that the board's aware that I'm currently actively enrolled personally in a graduate course at the Stanford Graduate School in communication, specifically with an eye to this problem and leadership in general. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that that's in the wind. And separately, to solicit any recommendations that you might have for third-party individuals that do work in terms of team building, communication building, the sorts of things that we need to be doing. I right now have 2 proposals in front of me. One of them has been endorsed by one of the trustees because they've taken part in this particular program before, and it's called HR Personality. That's really, these are all different programs with a similar goal, which is to basically, first off, lay the foundation that communication is one of the most difficult things that we try to do as human beings, especially when you layer onto it that we are all falling into different categories, different types of individuals that parse what we hear differently and say things differently and don't say. And so first off, to set the stage to say that we all communicate differently, and then to work on the ground rules as to how might we communicate more effectively. And once we've got the ground rules laid, then to come back and in a separate half-day training to work in depth. I'm focusing primarily on the leadership team right now. Once we go forward with this, and this would, the follow-on meeting, of course, would involve the chair of the library board as the person that I report to and the HR director in the city. And we'll see if we can schedule meetings to go to the next steps. But aside from amplitude training and HR personality, I'm open and will field proposals from any vendors that you might have. And again, just coming back because I just used a whole lot of words that don't communicate a whole lot. The bottom line is, first off, we communicate differently. Let's get in the room and agree that we communicate differently, but that different doesn't mean wrong. It just means different, and that we need to figure out how we need to communicate with one another. Then begin the process of communicating in depth, including one-on-one extended sessions with the external consultant and each of the members of the management team, so that we stand a chance to be working together as a team. And my hope with this would be that we as a management team would be cohesive enough to be able to lead a similar exercise in the all-day professional development that we currently have slated for the end of August. So I'm throwing that out there just to make sure that the board is aware of these moving parts over on the side. And if you have any recommendations as to who I might reach out to for some more support and advice in doing communication, training, and team development, I will gladly run that to ground. But if not, be aware that I'll be trying to develop this and bring this back also potentially as an item for the board's consideration, because it's not an insignificant cost, but it's a cost that may be well worth bearing. Madam Chair.
Any comments from the board? Questions, comments from the board?
I just have a question about the time frame. The board won't meet again before what the date here says, August 13th. So I don't know how we are going to approve or disapprove a program that happens before we meet.
Thank you. Trustee Markle, you're absolutely right. And I misspoke to suggest that the board would be able to review or approve this and get it on to the next steps in time for the all-day training. But my hope in the all-day training is that we as a team at least are communicating more effectively to be able to help lead that team. And it might be in part with some communication development. But if this takes longer than that, if it takes months to schedule, it's more important to get it right than to get it quick. But the sooner we can get on the same sheet of music, the better. I'm personally of the strong opinion that each of us has spent way too much time away from the workplace, and there's some relearning and comfort levels that need to be addressed. And I'm first and foremost in terms of stepping on toes, and I'm doing my best to come up to speed on that and figure out how to avoid doing that. But thank you for that input. You're absolutely right. It's just my suggestion is, now that Chair Balderson has made the mistake of saying yes to being appointed to lead this August group, both the Director of Human Resources and I have separately been cahooting and saying it would be really nice if we could have a meeting and talk through the possibilities in the near term of having HR internally lead some of that communication and fundamental building, laying of the groundwork, and help us decide if we as a team need to look to more expensive outside resources to continue that growth. I don't know the answer to that, though, because that's not a field that I'm expert in. And when we have that conversation, I trust to the chair's decision and the Director of Human Resources to tell me if I need to go flesh this out and bring this back to the board for a longer term consideration. Does that make sense?
Partly. So you're saying that you're going to have a professional development meeting on August 13th, an all-day one. And what you want to do is focus on communication. And you're going to do that with guidance and input from the Carson City HR department to help you do the professional development that you're going to do on the 13th, and to identify the possibilities, what future possibilities there are, and whether or not it will involve a third party and costs, et cetera.
Todd Goldgrove, for the record, that's exactly right. Trustee Markle. And thank you for boiling that down with one modification. What I would suggest is that, and thank you for indulging my sharing this sausage factory inside look as to what we're trying to do. But I think it's very important. And my hope from looking at each of our schedules right now, the earliest date where the managers and myself all line up are August 3rd and 4th. So it is my hope that in an earlier meeting between myself and the chair and the director of HR, that we could draw a bead on an earlier what we're going to be doing and map it out and attempt to have that initial meeting the 3rd and 4th. And if we can, that will accomplish two things. First and foremost is to make sure that we're all on the same sheet of music as a management team. And secondly, that we'll have a deeper insight as to the need for potentially going for deeper resources, or if this is something that Carson City HR can help us with and we're able to work together and get there, great, because then we get there much more quickly. And that's where I rolled it all together into misspeaking, and because in my best of all possible worlds, August 3rd and 4th would be a very bright and shiny, sunny day when we come out the other side and we're all just communicating and the birds are singing. And by the time we get to our all-day staff professional development, we as a management team will be able to work with HR at the same time to lead a similar conversation across the entire organization. That's my hope, but hope springs eternal, and we're developing a fail-safe program for the staff development should it be needed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the discussion from the board? I would just, so it sounds like we're attempting to hit a sort of reset button, if we could. So that's going to involve dealing with whatever issues have happened previously, and then agreeing on a path forward. And that sounds like a reasonable enough thing to have Carson City HR involved with. I'm happy to sit in as on behalf of the whole board as the chair on any meetings where you need me. And then the third-party vendor piece sounds like this is more of an FYI than anything else, right? That this isn't necessarily a level we're engaging at this particular moment, but just something that is a potential that you want us to not be blindsided with if it comes up later.
That's absolutely correct, Chair Baldus. And I've learned long ago that one of the biggest mistakes that I can make as a professional is to surprise my boss. And so I'm just trying to make sure that my boss has the heads up that this is all in the wind and the parts are moving. That's
sage advice. I would say too, though, as you think about third-party vendors, again, I would just be very, very careful about who you're contracting with, that you're following rules, that we are engaging in an open, competitive, transparent as possible process, if that's something that you are going down. And that's not just for this, that's anytime you're engaging in vendors, contracts, people providing goods or services to us. What I would hope is that you get the best possible outcome. We hope that competition is a real thing and we get, the best for what we're paying for, but also that we avoid any impropriety or appearance of impropriety, not appropriately bidding our contracts out. So that's just my 2 cents on third-party vendors. And it looks like you have another bullet here if you want to move forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies for having too many bullet items here. You're absolutely right. This last one is an FYI and just a question mark. So if any of the board feel strongly that the library should have a float in the Nevada Day Parade or would like to take part in the Nevada Day Parade, please let me know separately and I'll incorporate that. Right now, the conversation that we've had as a staff internally is essentially that what we've done in the past, which is basically require folks that aren't necessarily working to sort of show up and staff the parade, it's sort of like an indentured servitude, and that's not the right way to go about it. So we opened the question to say, is this something that we'd like to do? And if it's something we'd like to do, then is it something that we're willing to pay staff to be part of? And then the third piece of that would be, is that something that I need to work with the district attorney's office to make sure that we stay out of the weeds and post it as an open meeting, potentially if a quorum of board members could be available to be part of that?
So in the past, well, 2 years ago, we did the Nevada Day Parade, and the chairperson at the time and myself, we walked with the staff and did the float. I don't know what the open meeting laws were in effect for that, since it was like in a public place. We were walking down the street.
But were you discussing library business?
No.
Okay.
So,
Regardless of
I wasn't.
present.
I'm. And I didn't consider the staffing aspect of it at the time. I thought the staff that was there voluntarily, that they wanted to walk in the parade. And I guess if we were telling them that they had to come, obviously they should be paid for it.
So,
Thank you, Vice Chair Cranston. I need to clarify. I don't mean to suggest that anyone was being a big mean bully. It was just very strongly encouraged
Right.
that if you can be available, you show up and be part of the parade, and no one was required to be, and there was no, to my knowledge, repercussions if you did not participate. That said, it at least in my experience of the parade.
For clarification, what we had done in the past, and I believe what we did the last time we did it, is we did shift or change staff schedules. So if it was a work day.
Okay.
So yeah, people were being paid to do it.
Right.
It was a challenge to, since we are open so many days, that meant the library was closed, and we had to kind of shift hours and shift staff schedules to get that all to happen. So it is a little bit logistically challenging. But just for clarification, it was kind of like anybody who's in town was doing it, and it's a work day.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying, Amy. That's very helpful. That took place literally a few weeks after I first came on board, and I'm sort of terrified to realize that we were paying some of the people, and perhaps not all, but we'll map it out. If a cost like that is something that I would think I would have wanted to make sure that this board was aware of.
Yeah, I have a question about that. Sorry, Sari Nichols for the record. So as a state employee, I cannot be coerced, I cannot be bullied, I cannot, someone can't give me the stink eye and say, you have to do the Nevada Parade. And it has happened. So I understand. I mean, I really do, because I've gone through that. But the state does have a law that says you can't do that. So, and I don't know if Carson City has that, but I would look into it anytime you're having a conversation. And I understand it might be a little difficult, shift, I get that. But what we did, we ended up doing flex, because we don't get paid. Again, as a state employee, we don't get paid overtime. So we get either comp time, which is something you might want to look into too. So if it's too stressful for the staff to change, we have a staff shortage and we'll have to close a day. Maybe you can do comp time, which means later on they get an extra annual day or something. But there is a way to compensate them without stressing everybody out. And I would highly encourage nobody do anything they don't want to do or they can't do. Some people have kids and families and they can't, but they feel a little pressure to do it. And I really strongly do not want to see that.
Thank you for clarifying, Trustee Nichols. I believe that what Amy Lauder was suggesting is that staff were in fact using the variation of that flex. It's an alternative work schedule, which is just rescheduling when they're working, instead from working on the service desk to working in the parade. And it sounds like that's what took place.
Yeah, well, I think we've done I couldn't say exactly which people did which options, but I know for similar situations in the past, we've done either just changing like what days they're working that day, flexing it. I think we've also used comp time. Maybe, I don't recall if in that specific situation with the parade, but in other situations. I know we've done that when people needed to work on a different day for some reason, or we had holidays got weird or things happened like that. I know we have done that in the past.
So it sounds like it's an option. There's a precedent there. One of the fun things about having a Carson email account is you sometimes get announcements and things from as if you're a city employee. And I do seem to recall, gosh, a month ago or so, there was the same question, but not for the library, for Carson City employees. So I guess my question would be, I didn't see the follow-up to that, so I don't know if there's going to be dueling floats. One that's Carson City and one that's Carson City Library. Not that that's bad, but that, you know, would have staff having to choose. Do you have an update?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. You're absolutely right. The city had sent an email out to all the staff, and it's nearly 1,000 that work in the city, asking if they wanted to take part in a float build, and manning it, staffing it. I can't speak as to what the city has done in the past, but in my understanding, the library's float has traditionally been separate from that of the city. I don't know that that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just a thing. By the same token, I think there's a tremendous amount of value to the extent that we as library staff can cross that boundary and work with our fellow city workers. There's a lot of goodwill that flows back to the library when they see that we value the things that they also value. So I would encourage and have encouraged staff within the library that might want to take part in that to do so.
So,
but it hasn't touched the question as to whether or not we're going to have a float ourselves separately. When we discussed the question as a staff within the library, the general consensus was, we really kind of don't feel like it maybe this year. If we can find someone to drive the pedal library, maybe we can do something around it like we did last time. But for right now, it was a very lukewarm reception, if that helps.
yeah, so that was actually going to be my next question. What did the staff feel like doing?
And to be clear, and that's exactly the right question, because something like this, in my opinion, requires this to be driven from the ground up. It's not something that I, as the director, can come in and say, this is what we're going to do now, reschedule your desk shifts to make it happen. Or it's not something that I'm comfortable to do that way.
Well, can you tell us more about the pedal library?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The pedal library is a mobile library that's, if you've ever seen one of these canned ham trailers, imagine a canned ham trailer that's scaled down by about 50% with doors that open up, and books are in there on the shelves, and a broadband hotspot, and it's powered by a human being on a bicycle pedaling it down the street. And it's regularly taken out to events that Creative Learning has been actively involved with in the past. When we had the pedal library in the Nevada Day Parade a little bit less than 2 years ago, we had one of our staff actually pedaling it, but we also required the staff member to put on the Oprah the Owl felt outfit.
Oh, no.
Which is too warm to be doing both of those things at the same time.
Well, depending on the year, it might have been snowing on you.
And though among the staff as to whether it might make sense to consider getting an electric bicycle instead of requiring a human being to power it.
I think you should require Trustee Cranston to do it.
Oh, that would be brilliant.
It's part of your PT. All right.
I will unfortunately be out of town on that date.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Likely.
But if there's any general, please reach out to me.
So is the idea then that the pedal library could substitute for a float? You'd still pay the entrance fee and get the number, and that would be the float then?
Yes, Madam Chair. The float fee is nominal. I think it's on the order of $80. The real cost is in the staff time to be there. The library float entry was, if I recall, it was the pedal library, and we might have had the maker van, or we talked about having the maker van out there. I just remember having to almost jog to keep up with that, and making a conscious effort to not throw candy at children because you're not allowed to throw the candy,
Right.
but to hand it, and that complicates things. So that was essentially what we had done before. A year or two before that, in concert with the Nevada Reads project, I believe it was True Grit that year, and the theme, they actually built a float with a big rattlesnake and wearing a cowboy hat, and it was really quite a production. But I don't know that we have anyone on staff that has those skills, although I know that the Access Services librarian has some remarkable piñata building skills.
That's that's actually. Do we know what the theme is this year? Not sure. Okay.
I don't.
I would just be curious if logistically that's something you want to pull off with the pedal library. It sounds like you would want volunteers if Trustee Cranston's not available. I guess maybe we can solicit some other board member, trustee, or the rest of us could take turns on a bicycle if you're up for it. But if you can take turns, right, so you're not wearing out one person, there's a potential there. There's also, you could just skip it, wait for next year. So staff is lukewarm on it. We have some.
Well, I have a question. Is the staff lukewarm on building a float? Or, I mean, there are organizational groups that walk with a banner. I do feel that it's not inappropriate to have the library as part of the community, because that is kind of what the whole Nevada Day Parade is about. And I've certainly seen groups with walking with a banner, and you know, you have 10 to 25 or 50, however many people are in the organization, walking behind. And I know it's what, 3 miles, or it's but some people, you know, they'll switch off back and forth. And you know, I know that I'm sure there's resistance to building a float because that's a lot of work. But just showing up and walking for part of the way, helping to carry a banner that advertises or promotes the library.
Do we have a banner?
Well, a banner could be made.
A banner could be made. Thank you, Trustee Markle. You're absolutely right. My immediate reaction is it really 3 miles? Good heavens, it's also slightly uphill. But
It's not so bad.
It's slightly uphill.
It's not that bad.
So bad.
I've done it a few times. You know, we could dress up as our favorite fictional character from a book, you know, carry the banner.
Well, we could find a theme, and we could be on theme then. We could do books
On
on
theme.
brand, right? But have we heard anything from the Friends of the Library?
I was going to ask too.
And that's
They
it
weighed in on it.
precisely. I mean, not to interrupt, but I would look forward to, once we've worked through the revitalization of our strategic plan, once we're communicating and we're all pulling on the same rope over the coming months, because quite frankly, all of the staff are just having the library open and keeping everything together while they're wearing masks or not wearing masks. Everyone is just super stressed to the max. And if we can get through the communication and not layer on the requirement of a float this year, I would look forward to perhaps starting the conversation now and leading in through the next 12 months to have the Friends of the Library perhaps participating, members that use the library actively participating, you know, folks that, along with staff, not just simply saying the library needs to be represented and this is staff's job. This is one of those jobs that really should probably be shared with the community it serves.
Do we have a deadline on when we need to say yes or no?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To my knowledge, the deadline is literally up to within days of the event.
Okay.
What happens is the later your application gets in, the further out in the parade you
Makes
land.
sense.
And I believe that that's largely what happened last time, which is, I mean, we opted in a month ahead of time, I think, and then pulled it together quickly. When I came on board, they opted in, and we got the pedal library out and marched down the street.
Maria, is this something that young people in the library would be interested in participating, or do you think they're all busy with other organizations?
Maria Cuesta for the record. Just the general public, children in general.
Well, children, teenagers, your Bionics Club group.
I do think our teen volunteers would be interested in participating in something like this. I do think some of our heavy program users would be interested in participating. They would just need time
Right.
to know. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
So if I could make a suggestion, maybe we table this for right now since we don't have like a deadline that we need to decide on right now, and we ask the staff how interested they are, have them give us some feedback. In the next meeting, we can have their feedback and see what the library's general feel is.
And given different options, right? So we're lukewarm on building a float. We're warmer if it's the pedal library. Maybe we could be even warmer still if it was just holding a banner, getting some of the community involved. I think Maria's got a good sense of what folks would be interested in doing, especially with the teen volunteers. But then also too, if I could ask maybe Trustee Markle to engage a little bit more heavily on behalf of the board with the Friends of Carson City Library. If that's something you're up to doing.
Okay.
I know they've got meetings going on. I think they just had one, right? So if you can attend meetings as you're able to do on behalf of the board, it has been difficult to, and they don't have a requirement to report anything to us at all. It's just a nice to know. So if you could help ease that burden and just kind of liaise a little bit, I think that would be really, really beneficial.
Okay.
If you've got that. You seem interested in.
Well, also, I was wondering if this might be an opportunity to coordinate this new banner that we're talking about with a
parade banner.
Yeah, so that it's a double whammy. People might see the banner on the building, and it gets reinforced by something that's being done, like
a similar design.
Yeah,
or,
yeah. I mean, or like I said, the kids, the Bionic group, or people, things that people are doing, because that's what the library is about today. It's not check out books. It's we're doing stuff. We're learning stuff. We're fun.
Thank you, Trustee Markle. Department Business Administrator Holt and myself, between the two of us, will make sure to circle you in with any of the emails and contact and information we might have from the friends, and it will be tremendously helpful to have your voice as part of that conversation.
Okay.
I would certainly appreciate having some board presence involved and having that connectivity a little stronger.
Okay.
So the recommendation was table it, no decisions, no input on this. We all good with that for now?
I think we still have time.
Sounded like it.
Sounds like we got till the day before.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the director's report.
So we'll move on to agenda item 6A. Joy Holt, you are up.
Department Business Manager Joy Holt for the record. I apologize because last meeting, y'all asked us as managers to provide a little bit of a synopsis of what we do. And I forgot to do that before I left for vacation last week. So the agendas got posted with my report before I was able to make that correction. So I'm just going to give you a very quick synopsis of what I do. I am the department business manager, and my department is technically the administration department. I have, that includes one manager, one library assistant, and one administrative clerk. What we do is have oversight and help have oversight and maintenance over the budget, as you all know, liaise with all of the outside agencies as needed, particularly or most predominantly human resources and facilities. Also, internally, part of what I do is make sure that what we are doing internally aligns with, that our internal processes and procedures align with the city's policies and procedures, the municipality's code, and state statute. Also, part of what we do is help the library director survey and assess workflow for efficiencies, and just make recommendations for places where we can be more efficient. Mostly that has included me focusing on the administration department and places where we can be most efficient. So hopefully you'll see the fruits of that labor in the reports. So that said, at the time that I created this, the final budgets were not completely loaded into our accounting system, and they have been now completely loaded, so we can see that with the new system, it used to be in the past that they would provide us with a list of what our budget was. Now their expectation is that we'll just go in and look at it electronically, which is quite helpful actually, and you'll see on the next reports what the fiscal year 22 funding final budget was, because you'll see on that report where we started or where we're starting. Also the grants update. So this is a little bit repetitive, but I will say that last time we talked about a budget adjustment that myself and Maria had to collaborate on, or we collaborated on a budget revision request because of changes in expenses for the original ask that we made, and it reduced our overall award, but we did receive the approval and the grant and aid documentation that shows the reduction. So we'll be finalizing and wrapping up that. The last thing, Bionics Camp was it just last week, Maria? Yeah, so we've got a quite a large window of time to get everything in and get everything taken care of to wrap all of that up. But the sooner the better, while it's fresh in our minds. And then in reference to the CARES grant, so I owe y'all an apology, because last time we talked about this and we were talking about the computers that we were buying, and I did make the purchase through IT for 5 computers. The ETA is November, which is, I think, pretty par for the course right now. Would you say that, Trustee Cranston?
Yeah, I mean, it's faster than people are getting cars nowadays. 'Cause they can't get chips, so.
Yeah. So, but what I was mistaken about was that those purchases for that purchase for those computers is actually not grant money. That was the Friends made a contribution for 5 new computers. We matched that contribution by asking for an additional amount of money, or a supplemental from the city, which they agreed to. So we did make the purchase of the computers using those funds, and like I said, they have been purchased. The grant money is actually been used to purchase, I'm not sure when they'll be here, Chromebooks, what else did we say? Chromebooks, laptop, or MacBooks, MacBooks, and additional accessories to go with those. So I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what, but the amount of money that we received was exactly the amount of the items that we wanted to purchase, because it's a grant, right? So I was confusing myself, and you guys, I watched the playback of the meeting last week, and I was like, oh, or last time I was like, wow, I was turned around, so I apologize for that. And then the last but not least item on mine is the LSTA, or Library Services and Technology Act, American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And we have, so this is the state library received $2,683,783 from this federal act. Of that, they're going to be parsing out $1.8 million to Nevada libraries. In order to opt in for these monies, we had to do that in a formal document to the state, and we did opt in. At that time, we weren't required to have a firm project or understanding of what we're going to do with those funds. The way that it will work is we've opted in. They'll be sending out an application packet, which they've not done, and I don't have an ETA on that. I suspect that it might be a little bit delayed because the state library's library planning and development team is down to one person, who's the LSDA coordinator. So she's got a lot on her plate. So like I said, I have no ETA as to when we'll actually get the application packet. What the funds will be, the impression that I get is it'll be contingent on the actual project and how they're going to determine eligibility. Eligibility is determined by the fact that we're a library, but how the money will get doled out is yet to be determined. So we've opted in. We are actively working on ideas as to what we want to use that money for, but we are definitely going to participate. It's sort of, I know that's vague, but.
So you have a list here?
Those are the things that are the priorities of the grant. So we will certainly, what we're certainly considering is what can we do and how do we want to move forward in supporting digital inclusion efforts.
What does that mean?
That has to do with my understanding of it as it relates to this ARPA grant is providing or investing in equipment or technology that can help folks have connectivity remotely. So this is a big issue, and what really inspired this ARPA as a whole was the discovery through the COVID experience that so many communities are digital deserts. So that is really a huge part of what this act is trying to address.
That's not such a huge, I mean, the digital desert idea, that's more like the rural areas of Nevada that they're having like no Wi-Fi, no connectivity. That's not such a big issue here in Carson for our library. But the remote connectivity that makes sure people have access to library resources via like websites, cloud computing, things of that nature, that would be something we could definitely address.
Certainly.
Looking through this list, I see that, that says that providing funding for personnel training materials, supplies, so that rings to me like it's staff stuff. We can spend this money to enrich staffing. Give you guys some trainings maybe that you might be, wanting. Do stuff to make your lives a little bit better as library employees. And I think, honestly, I would like to focus on that.
Funding for personnel as in additional positions?
Well, I'm looking at the training portion mostly. Technology, training, materials, supplies, equipment, etc. Personnel, I imagine it does mean hiring people. But I think if we take that personnel aspect and we think about it as people who work for the library, and we look at our existing staff, investing in them is what I would like to see.
So can you just expand a little bit more on your stance about digital inclusion and access to we're talking about internet access across the city. Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Chair, sorry, to answer your question, you're exactly right. The focus of the ARP legislation itself is particularly focused on, in librarian land, we would call it closing the digital divide. Metrics that they have to show success are specifically number of devices in people's hands, including Wi-Fi hotspots, tablets, and laptops, if that helps clarify. And if to get there, it requires training and resources to get them up to speed, those are absolutely eligible.
And if you want to cheat, you can increase the number of devices in the hands of people using library resources if you take a BYOD model and you create a cloud environment where they can access Carson City Library resources.
BYOD meaning bring
your own device. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you can either bring your own device to the library, or you can access the library from your home, or you can use it on your phone. However, might be whichever solution we can actually implement, and a lot of that's maybe more money than we're going to get from this grant, but it's worth looking into.
Did we get feedback from community members or other bodies about access, internet access? I'm thinking about like the schools.
Well, we are still waiting on results from the survey that we did with Steinman at UNR. I expect that we will see a response about connectivity and internet access, et cetera. I get the sense, when I just think about it logically, of course, there are going to be the urban areas that are going to get a chunk of money, I'm sure. But it's $1.8 million for 22 libraries. So who knows? I'm hopeful that we'll be able to really implement some robust projects or a project. It's really just one project.
Have to speculate. The best thing you can do is just write a really great proposal.
Right. But we need to nail down what that proposal is going to be.
Right.
And that's where we're at right now.
And I think this is potentially a pain point for lowest income users, right? So people who perhaps are eligible for like the federal Lifeline program, right? So they can get some data that way. But that probably won't support everything that you're trying to do, especially a lot of job applications are online these days as well. So that connectivity piece again, I would just be curious to have some hard data around what the city demographics look like. And I don't disagree that training and investing in library staff is always a top priority, is always a good idea, even if you don't think those staff are going to be here forever. If they're going to go and promote and spread their knowledge in other libraries, it is still good for libraries and humanity in general to keep these folks as trained up as possible. So I don't disagree on that point at all.
Well, especially if we can invest in a kind of training programs where it's not like a one-shot use license where you take the training, okay, that's it, you can't use it anymore. If we can invest in a program where it's like you have this training for your library now and you can utilize it. I can't really speak to specific training programs that might be viable for the library, but like a good example is in the IT world, we have programs that you could purchase that have 40 licenses, and when someone leaves, that license doesn't go away. You just give it to the next person who comes in. Now they can access the training. Mm-hmm. So that kind of stuff is usually a yearly subscription, or you can buy, you have this for 5 years now, and in 5 years you can decide if you want it again or not. But those are kinds of trainings that I like to see.
Well, I'm also a big fan of train the trainer model myself. So if staff can become experts and then they become the trainers of our patrons, which is really what we're all here for. So
I agree. I think we can really do I'm happy to do the research on that because that's sort of my hobby is researching, going down a rabbit hole of research.
You have a tremendous asset right next to you here with Maria Cuesta as well. So.
That's true. So I really would, ideally, just in my opinion, I would like to do something that's kind of train the trainer because I also enjoy that. And I also think it would be nice if you happen to see anything like this, if the training was iterative. So, you learn something and then you build upon that something, right? So, because I feel like that is a really useful and effective way to make the knowledge stay put and have a long-term impact. So these are all great ideas.
Would this grant allow funds to be used for like a pop-up library, to take a suitcase full of laptops, Chromebooks to a community center at an apartment complex, and whether it's kids or adults or whatever, and do a series of trainings, or even I mean, I know that there's been tiny bits of talk here and there about branch library in Carson, but I know there's areas of Carson that are further away than other areas, and to take resources, not just books to check out, and not just for kids, but to sort of spread the availability of resources that the library can have or that can enrich people's lives. And would that fall under, I mean, I know that's a little bit of work trying to
No, I totally understand.
frame
I know where
that.
you're going with that. I understand. I don't know, because at this point, it's in the fleshing out stages.
Yeah, and I know that LSTA doesn't typically fund like personnel, like jobs, like a position. They don't typically fund a position for more than the grant term, which is usually a year to maybe 18 months if you're lucky. But you also have to prove sustainability.
Right.
For
Yeah,
that
that's a
kind of
very
thing.
important piece, right?
So, it's tricky. Those
Mhm.
grants have a two-edged sword. They're really wonderful for the projects, but they're really bad for continuing the projects.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is a very valid point. And one of my greatest concerns about any type of grant that we participate in or that we propose is that we have thought about the really beginning with the end in mind. Where do we want this to end up and beyond the end of the grant period, so that we do have a plan for sustainability. So that's an excellent point. And I do think that no library is alone in having engaged in grant opportunities that were not sustained. So we just have to remain mindful of that and make strides to remain mindful of that. As far as, I think as far as the pop-up library and so forth, it does say equipment.
Yeah.
And I do think that I can't say with any certainty, but the sense that I get from the copious amount of cyber stalking I've done of this grant and as it's evolved, is that I think, and again, I might be just being hopeful, but I think that it's going to be a little bit wide open because of just the state of the world that we're in and the acknowledgement that so many people, especially in the rurals, particularly in the rurals, have such a lack of connectivity. And I think at the end of the day, the goal is to level the playing field. And the playing field, the fact that it's not level became glaringly obvious. So
I would be curious, we've talked about the first and the third priorities, the middle one there to provide rapid emergency relief to libraries across the country. Do we have examples of what that might look like or what that means?
Well, there are some libraries that are hanging on by a thread financially because of the COVID experience. So my sense, and Dr. Colgrove can chime in here, my sense is that that's sort of the intent there, is to keep libraries alive, those that are really, there are libraries here in Nevada, Lyon County comes to mind, that has been narrowly escaping shutdown since the economic downturn 10 years ago. So they're extremely short-staffed. They have 8 branches. I could go on, but
8 branches and 5 staff.
Right. I mean, their library director literally travels. I mean, Lyon County is spread out, and she literally travels from library to library, I think, each day a week. And how she does that, I think they're all rotating. So that's the point of that. The impression that I get is to address that very real need in many communities.
Got it. All right.
Well, 1.8 million divided by 22 is $81,000. And, obviously bigger libraries will probably claim bigger portions, but, that's a lot of money that could be could be very beneficial to libraries around the state, not just Carson City.
Right. And the thing I think we have to, or that I think about, is that we have a $1.8 million budget, plus our gift fund and grant money. Las Vegas has a $70 million budget.
70.
So we have that in our favor, that we're doing really excellent work. And we are, I dare say, have more community involvement and on many levels. We have a greater friends support network in a community that is maybe 5% of the size of Las Vegas, if I'm doing the math in my head correctly. Those who are mathematicians in the room. I'm great if you put a dollar sign in front of it, but.
Hey, Madam Chair, yeah, each of these points are right on target, and we will be getting more clarity. I have a meeting scheduled with new State Administrator Mike Strom and Department Business Manager Joy Holt tomorrow, and we'll be asking these questions in detail. If I can speak to several of the questions that were raised, though, you're absolutely right. There's another layer that goes into how they're divvying that pie up. First off is the intent of the grant is to serve underserved communities. So if your library or library branch is serving underserved populations, you move to the top. And the second piece is that in the process of opting in, it was to say, who's the library director and how many staffed branches do you currently have? So that the number that gets divided into that 1.8 million will probably be closer to 70 or 80. So it'll be a smaller number. But that taken in concert with potentially FCC ARP funds is also transformative. And if we can call our representatives, we might still get the Build America's Libraries funding. So if there are particular questions beyond this that you would like input from the Administrator Strom's, from Administrator Strom on that, it's literally his discretion. He's the one that makes the call as to where those fundings go.
So I think just perhaps going forward, I'm looking to the other side of the table for folks who follow money very closely.
So, yeah, I was just going to say, so Sarah Nichols for the record, and just so I'm transparent, I work for the Nevada Indian Commission, and we are actually working with the governor's office, the Office of Economic Development and Energy, on the American Rescue Plan Act to get funding, get the money to the right, use it for the right reason, to get broadband out to the rural communities. And so I've been in a lot of talks about what they talk about when they're talking about this particular grant and money like this. So I really just have two things to say. First of all, I think you've done an amazing job of, doing some research on this. One of the things that we tell the tribes is this is a one-time opportunity, and we really need to recognize that they're not going to keep pushing this money out. The other thing is, you're right. I mean, the one thing the pandemic did teach us is there's a huge, huge divide. I mean, some of us already knew that, but the government's had to recognize the fact that there's a huge divide when it comes to kids being able to go to school. Could they go to school remotely? A lot of the rules. And a lot of the urbans, let's be honest, a lot of the urbans couldn't because their parents can't afford the internet. So when we're looking at this and you want money, I think one of the things you should be thinking about, or we all should be thinking about when we vote on this, is training is always great. I don't ever want to say no to training, but this is geared more, what are you going to do for the community? So again, I like your idea of pop-up libraries, because what if we all, let's say, shut down again and we had pop-up libraries that had internet? We could go take those pop-up libraries somewhere and get the hotspot going, and the kids could come do their homework. So so we have to think about things like that for this money, but that's really what it's geared towards. And so when they are looking at these applications, that's kind of what they're going to have in mind, just to help you out. But
Short-term
Thank
investment, long-term impact. Kind
absolutely,
of, yeah.
absolutely.
So
That's a
to
great way of
that
putting it.
end, to the extent that either of you are available to engage with our department business manager, Holt, or the director for any meetings regarding how these funds are going to be dispersed or how those requirements are going to shake out, or just general, I would say, general fiscal stewardship, I would really love to see just a little bit stronger board presence. And don't wait for me to tell you, oh, there's a meeting going on, just connect and go. And I know we don't right now have an officer on the board as a treasurer, but this is something that's always, we could put on another agenda to discuss. But I think in terms of what we are responsible for as you go through that trustee training, it's a lot. And having folks who can follow money is critical. So just go forward. Go forth. Connect.
She's staring at you, Trustee
Right.
Lucas.
Just as you have time, right?
Well, certainly, I am happy to send everyone out, push out information as we receive it, because as soon as we have more information, it's off to the races. So,
Yeah.
And if I may, Madam Chair, I just wanted to follow up. You had a question about the demographics and of the community. And it is a number that's on the order of about 45% of this community's kids, at least, are eligible for free or reduced school lunch. And if that gives an indication. Trustee Markle, your suggestion for taking the pedal library out as a pop-up library, or whether or not you mentioned the pedal library, is a clever idea. That's something that we can do. And if we can do, perhaps we should do it, because really the devil is in the details of how do we accomplish these goals of closing the digital divide while being very mindful of the fact that our existing staff are already overloaded. How do we sort this and rearrange what we're doing inside the library so as to free up the human resources that we need to be able to do this? And that's the task that you've given me, and I appreciate the support of this board.
Thank you. Do you have more?
I'm done.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Very good.
Thanks.
All right. Shall we move on to our collection development report? Amy Louder.
Amy Lauder, Collection Development Manager. For the record, it's Statistics Day.
Yay!
As
We
promised,
asked for this last time.
I've been trying to do this around this time as we close we at least my department closes the past fiscal year and starts the next one. I did start out with our super wacky line graphs for circulation. I had the jarring realization a few weeks ago that this is the third fiscal year impacted by the pandemic. So that's why I put just the past 3 fiscal years with the most normal one, fiscal year 19, for comparison, as it were. Checkouts, you can see very clearly when we closed altogether in April of 2020. Shockingly, perhaps, circulation was not 0. I think we had a few hundred checkouts over those months. I'm like, is that all staff? I think some of them were renewals as well. It wasn't actually 0, but it was pretty down at towards that bottom line. Bounced back kind of in that summer to around that 10,000 mark. Went back down. We closed to the public in November, but we continued curbside service. For reference, during last summer, I've lost track, but we were doing curbside service in the morning and open hours in the afternoon. And once we had to close the building again, we continued the curbside service. So that's why it did not drop as far. And then when we reopened, I believe late February, it kind of bounced back in the spring to around the same point. It was interesting to me We were open more hours. In the summer, again, we were only open in the afternoons. In the spring, we were open first 10 to 6 and then back to our Saturday hours and then evening hours, maybe the other way around. Yeah, it's all a blur. And then finally Sunday, we're at full hours now, but it did not start climbing above that mark up until school let out and things like that, about late May, early June. But you can see kind of that it is starting to tick back upwards from that point now that summer has started. I'm just anecdotally starting to see a lot more families, kids, and teens back in, which we were not seeing during the winter. It was very predominantly older adults during that time, so that we are starting to get some more groups back in, so that's good. So that's positive, such as it is, I would say. E-content, some of you have seen versions of this graph before. That's mostly talking about Overdrive. It also includes a couple other things, but it's mostly Overdrive. I hope you have in color. I have black and white.
I'm looking at the screen here that's in color.
So it's a little easier to read in color, but we're definitely seeing a year-over-year increase continuing. Definitely the peak was that same kind of late March, April, early May of 2020, and it did drop a little after that, but it has remained significantly higher and continues to stay quite high during this past fiscal year, and we can expect that to continue. Let's see, databases are just generally not particularly consistent, so I don't have a ton to say about that except for the curious coincidence that database usage does seem to drop when the building is closed, which is interesting to me. I do think, again, kind of anecdotally, Overdrive is very, very good at driving users to their service through the library. They have put effort and infrastructure into directing people and getting people to their library. If you Google Overdrive, it will give you buttons, find your library, whereas most electronic resources do not really trouble to do that. So I think usage is much higher when there's a little more hand-holding on our end because they're just not as user-friendly, generally speaking. So Overdrive did well when we're closed, but I'm sorry? On that. Oh, sure. Sorry. We're still on line graphs. There we go. Yeah. So that, and I think I mentioned last month, I think with the databases, it's also a little bit goofy. Most of these are, I try to be as consistent as possible, but there's a lot of different services and we're kind of dependent on what data they report. Most of these I try to use sessions, number of sessions, number of logins, something similar to that. A few of them, such as Rosetta Stone, are number of hours used because that's how they count it. They don't count logins. So it's a little odd, but there we are. We do our best.
Amy?
Yes, Bets.
This looks a little school-driven, you think?
Some of it. I've definitely noticed with EBSCO, not as much this year, but in previous years, I think there's a spike at one, I can't see it on my little, I don't have my glasses on. But there is a point where I've noticed consistent spike in usage in a particular month in EBSCO, and I definitely think that was school driven, and that was absent this year. I feel like another, again, just like feelings wise, I have no, can't prove it, but just my feeling is that another contributing factor is school is online now. Kids are online all day. I feel like they're much less likely to go seek out more online school. Case in point, our tutor.com subscription in previous years, the way it's structured is basically we pay an upfront fee, but it's intended to cover the cost of live tutors that they interact with online, and that's an hourly wage. So they kind of cap us when they can no longer justify that hourly wage. And we've been basically having enough usage that it pays for, we have as many uses as we've paid for. as, if that makes sense. Whereas this year it was significantly lower, which was unusual. And again, it's like, well, we thought there would be more usage because it's online and people are at home, but there was actually much less. And I feel like that's contributing. If you're doing school online all day at home, you might just be done. I feel like that's how I would feel. Yeah. So that was very interesting, kind of the difference between kind of the more educational or harder to use resources versus the recreational, easy to use ones.
Well, I think it's not just students. I think it probably affected teachers as well.
Oh, definitely.
Teachers being online all day.
All day. It's so, and a lot of them were trying to do both and different things on different days, and I can't even imagine it so much. So just some interesting things. It's hard to pull much conclusion out of a lot of this, but it's definitely changing and evolving. So there's that. For funding, I just provided a little bit of a breakdown of both our fiscal year 21 expenditures for the past year, along some different categories, and then also just a quick breakdown with even fewer categories of how our circulation kind of breaks down. For the expenditures, contract services is things like cataloging services, ILL services, things like that. Books, lease, so those are both books. Audio and video kind of speak for themselves. Overdrive, databases. So we're getting more circulation out of Overdrive than the percentage we're spending on it, which is cool. Books are still most of circulation, even with, the changes and stuff. AV is also still doing very well. I think it's a bit lower than, again, everything's a bit lower than usual, but it's still comparatively doing reasonably well. On the next page, I have just a little comparison of where we're getting our collection funding from last year and this year. Our book budget is effectively flat. I put a note in here. We did have a $3,000 augmentation mid-year in fiscal year 21. We are starting with the same amount as we started with last year, though. The Friends donation, to my knowledge, the amount donated for this calendar year had not been allocated to anything particularly specific. We're operating under the assumption that none of that's going to collections this year. Interestingly enough, things are magically working out. The state is using federal funding to pay for a statewide subscription to LinkedIn Learning, which normally we pay for on our own, and that's about the same amount. So I'm able to cover normally that donation in the context of collections. We use that to cover a large chunk of the lease program, the book lease programs, as well as the Overdrive platform fee. So I was kind of worried I would have to cut something probably from the lease, and I do not have to do that, so that's good. Gift donation, it depends on what we get in over the course of the year, so I don't have a number for next year for that. Magazine donations actually stayed pretty level despite us being closed around Christmas. Last year, we now have all the periodicals on the first floor, so we have upstairs largely open right now, but not the seating area, but all the magazines are accessible again, so that's good. State collection grant funding last year, we don't have a number for this year yet, maybe in a few months. LSTA funding, last year's was a section of the Bionics grant used for materials, and then the amount in the fiscal year 22 is CARES Act funding. We are using that for Overdrive audiobooks that will be spent by the end of August, probably pretty soon here. And so that's just the overview of that. And then I just had my little department summary for our new people. We're responsible for selection, acquisition, cataloging, processing, and weeding of all library materials, physical and digital, promotion, displays, signage, online curated list, flyers, newsletters. We also do a lot of the management for the website in collaboration with Creative Learning, and some social media work. We also maintain, alongside the main branch, we have our little mini branch over the Boys and Girls Club, which you can see the homework room in the bottom right photo. That's our refreshed collection over there. We largely stock that. We bought a new core collection for it a few years ago, and now we refresh it again from that lease program. Really helps with that because we can circulate new books in every year. We also manage interlibrary loan for requests outside of the cooperative and host the yearly Capital City Reads Community Read program. Does anybody have any questions on any of those many things?
I think you're off the hook.
Good job.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to creative learning? Maria Clusta.
All right, Maria Clusta, Creative Learning Manager for the record. So I just wanted to start off with my overview of what creative learning does. We typically consist of one manager, one librarian, 2 senior library assistants, 2 part-time library clerks, and up to 2 high school interns, depending on funding. And our main focus is providing programs, outreach, and special events for all ages in person and virtually. So the past year, I did include some statistics to share tonight. These statistics are very different from previous years because basically all of the programs that we did were virtual. So it wasn't in person. There are some in person that are in here because we did do Think Bionics in person. So there are a few. If you guys want me to separate this out at all later time, I can provide that next month. But yes, so our statistics look a bit different, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of how our reach was this past year. And we've been focusing predominantly on virtual. I am really proud of our team because we were able to start offering virtual programs 4 days after we closed the library. I feel like we were probably the first library in Nevada offering a virtual program, and that was our book discussion group. So that was a really amazing turnaround that we had. We also do a lot of grant projects. Typically, I do about 2 to 3 grant projects depending on what the focuses are. So this past year, we did have Think Bionics. We also had a community science backpack, community science grant. And then we also focus heavily on partnerships within the community. We have really strong partnerships with Boys and Girls Club, the Parks and Rec Department, the school district, just to name a few. We do a lot with outreach. We offer library tours in normal times. That's something that's really fantastic. We usually work with Fremont a couple times a year, and it's great having the kids in. And I laughed a little bit when you mentioned EBSCO jumping, because I remember one year we actually did a customized library tour for 5th graders, and we did like a scavenger hunt. They were learning how to research for a project. So we might have used that to do that.
Maybe that's why.
Yes,
because they also have it. It's a statewide. EBSCO's statewide, so that's largely through. I mean, all the schools have access as well. So if they're accessing it through the schools, that's not captured in our statistics. I'm like, why?
Right.
So interesting. Maybe that's why.
Yeah. We also offer a lot of special events throughout the year. We have Bonanza that we've been partnering with Parks and Rec each year, Capital City Reads with Amy. We do Nevada Reads, Summer Learning, Winter Reading, a little bit of everything on that. And then we also do a lot with marketing. We make all of our own flyers, edit the website, social media. YouTube was huge for us to add new content over the past year on there as well. And then making sure everything's ADA compliant. We make sure that all of our videos have closed captions and alt text for the social media platforms. We also create monthly calendars, and we work with Amy on a weekly newsletter that goes out to the community, which is really great. That's growing consistently. And then also we are in charge of the Digitorium, Makerspace, and Pedal Library that's been mentioned a couple times. So we do a little bit of everything, which is exciting. And unfortunately, this past year, again, has been a bit different. We haven't been able to do all the things that we normally would be able to do, but hopefully this upcoming year we can start integrating some of those other things back into the mix. Going into my statistics real quick. So this is pretty basic, but I wanted to give you guys an idea. So this is statistics from July 1st, 2020 through June 30 of this year. So we have our live programs listed and our recorded programs. I did want to note that our recorded programs are unique views. And we did have a huge number of unique views for the computer classes that are on our YouTube, which makes sense because a lot of times people, we tag all of our videos. So if they do a keyword search, there's a good chance that one of our videos can pop up and they watch it. So it's really nice to see that so many people are using those resources through that. And then I also broke this down a little bit so you could see for age groups how many programs we were offering, as well as the attendance that we had for each of those age groups. And then I also included some summer learning information on here too. That wraps up July 31, so we still have about a week and a half left. And I do have some updated numbers on that real quick I'll share because it's exciting. So let's see. Well, actually, the numbers stayed about the same for registrations, but for completions, we have 94 total people that have completed so far. So that's about 20% of people signed up. Hopefully next week we'll have some more people complete. And then I also wanted to share our reading. So they blew it out of the water again this year. They are at 250,437 minutes read so far this summer. So they still have a week. We'll see if they can get it up to 300. But it's really exciting to see so much participation because we weren't really sure how it was going to go this year. But it's nice to see everyone's ready to participate again and get back into it. But does anyone have any questions about anything that I shared on this?
I would be curious to know, when we look at these statistics, if we could view these as I see how them split out like by age or by target audience, if we could view those as perhaps a percentage of overall card holders in that same category. And I'd also be curious, and I don't know if this is a question for you or Ermal or whomever, about how frequently people are using their cards. You know, do we have like a core group and that's just kind of who our target audience is? Or are there folks on the fringe? How far, you know, how much are people really using their cards?
Right.
I'm curious.
I believe I gave Dr. Colgrove a spreadsheet maybe a couple months ago that had it was however we defined recent users, maybe the past 3 years, people had used it relatively recently, broken down by age group. And I couldn't tell you what those numbers were off the top of my head.
Oh, of
but
course
he does
not.
have that.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking like just ongoing. I think it might be a nice picture. And that's something that I wouldn't expect on a monthly meeting. Maybe it's a quarterly or an annual kind of picture to paint. But I'd be curious to kind of know percentages, what these numbers represent as a percentage of the whole group of card holders or patrons. And then also too, does that include the e-content, right? If you're using Overdrive or Libby or whatever, like, is that split out separately? How can we get that information? Is there...
That's a little bit harder because I think they do not retain the card numbers.
Oh, interesting.
I think last time we checked on that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know.
You'd have to do some creative data science.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but no, I agree. It would be very interesting.
Y'all are the information experts here. So if anyone can figure it out, I have full confidence it's y'all. But again, that's not like a monthly question. I wouldn't say more either quarterly or annual. Any other comments, discussion, questions from the trustees?
I think it's difficult to get some of those statistics due to privacy. You know, Overdrive probably doesn't keep library card numbers for a good reason because you can identify the person.
I think there's a setting, and I think we specifically when it was set up, had it off. So then several years later, when we were like, I'm curious if we can get this, we're like, oh, we can't. Circulations, you can, because you can pull reports that have like the last time somebody, when was this, here's a patron, it's basically a patron report. When was the last time they checked something out? There's a field with that date. So you can do it that way. And they also have their birth date, but you have to do, again, some creative data science to group it into categories because you just have the date.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of information.
But there's ways to do some of that.
And any attempt that you can, you would just, give us those caveats, of course. But I'd be curious to know, and certainly we want to respect folks' privacy in any way that we can de-identify information as we look at it for big picture purposes.
I thought I read the other day that Libby basically deletes all your information once you give that book back. I swear I just read that a couple days ago.
So I've got a timeline. Here's the thing. Every time I log out of my Libby app, all the way out where I have to put my card number back in, it seems to lose. But I can go back on my timeline and see stuff I've checked out since my last time logging.
I think it should have it.
I don't know if that goes.
There was something goofy that happened.
Library then, not so much Libby?
I don't know.
There was something that happened a few weeks ago where a lot of people got logged out and had to reset up or something. And I think it happened to me too. And I don't know what that was about. I may have missed an email. It's possible.
Data breach?
But it seems to keep your reading history if you have that. I don't know if you can turn it on and off.
It would be for the user.
But I can't see that. If I'm logged in on the back end, I cannot see that. I can't see what a person has checked out. A thing I can see if somebody calls us and says, I have this book checked out and I have an issue with it, I can look up that book and possibly resolve it from that end, but I can't pull up a patron account and see what they have checked out through Overdrive.
Which I don't know
what I
need to know.
Yeah. It's usually not relevant.
This is meta,
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting because you actually have much less data available than you do in our ILS for our physical circulation.
Well, Libby's not tied to the library. I can say that because I use 2 different libraries in mine, and it has your little library. And it's all my stuff is shelved from both libraries. It's not separated out. So.
Yeah, they've. I think that's part of some of their more recent stuff. Your bookshelf will have anything we've checked out. They've also done some things, and I haven't looked into exactly how it works to make it easier to manage all your stuff across different cards from different organizations too. So there's all sorts of things going on.
Did you have a tidbit, Trustee Canston?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if this is relevant to the app itself. There was a big data breach. A lot of people's passwords and accounts were hacked across various devices and services, and it's possible Libby was hit by that some way. So they might have kicked everyone off as a precaution if someone was accessing your account.
Yeah, I don't know, because the weird thing that happened to me, because you just sign in with the library card, it validates through a SIP connection, I believe. But you have to enter your email address separately from that to get notifications, and that got unset up, I think. And so maybe there was something with that.
Is that pretty standard?
I mean, it's a way, if you don't have direct control over someone's account, you can basically just force all their sessions to log off. And then the user who's hijacked their service or account is removed, and then if they don't have the credentials to get back in, they can't get back in, right?
Got it.
So it's kind of a way to rescue hijacked sessions. I don't know if that's relevant.
Yeah, and it doesn't use a password at all, so I don't know, but there's a lot of the technical end of it I have only a surface understanding of, so could be anything.
I don't want to speculate too much.
Yeah. That's fair.
We're just making stuff up.
Questions on creative learning? We're on to access services. We're missing a manager here.
Madam Chair.
You what?
Make him ride the
That's
bike.
right. Get him to ride the bike. He's not here.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Vice Chair Cranston. Todd Coolgrove for the record. I just wanted to report that Access Services Manager Ermel Reinhardt is unable to join us this evening because he's unfortunately out sick today. But we'll do our best, and I'll do my best to try to field any questions you might have from his report. Otherwise, I trust that it'll be read into the record. As a side note, though, since I'm already speaking, I wanted to thank the board again for the questions that you're raising. These are precisely the questions that will give us the opportunity to focus more sharply on the information that the board needs for its consideration. Thank you for those questions.
So I think, what's the pleasure of the board here? Can we all assume that we did our homework or will do our homework to read the report? If we have questions specific, we can bring them back.
Oh, it's pretty straightforward.
Looks like there's some cleanups, some procedures I'm excited to see. I know when people talk about efficiency, sometimes it kind of freaks me out because especially with services to the public, you do want a certain level of redundancy built in because you always want to be reliable and available to folks. But that doesn't mean we have to hold on to everything all the time either. So it's nice to see a balance being struck there. And if there aren't questions or we can hold questions for later, we can move on back to agenda item 4B, which was presentation of length of service certificates. And then we'll wrap up with public comment after. Does that sound good? I'm sorry, I skipped board member announcements. Thank you. Board members' announcements and requests for information. Trustees.
Just an announcement, I will not be here next month. I will be out of town on orders, so I will miss the meeting.
On orders and we can't talk about?
That's right.
That's right. Fair enough. Okay. Other announcements, requests for information? All right. Then I'll move. Now I'll go back to agenda 4B, presentation of length of service certificates to library employees.
Madam Chair, Todd Coolgrove for the record. We have Maria Klesta, Creative Learning Manager, and Amy Lauder, Collection Development Manager, both of whom recently received their 5-year certificates from the city for their service to the city. And thank you to this board for being willing to recognize their service, not just to the city, but to the library proper. We do have a token of esteem from the library. If I don't know how you'd like to proceed in terms of presenting them, but perhaps we might be able to twist Chris's arm into taking a photo with each of the recipients in the board. Would you like the board to remain seated and we can come up and stand in front of you, or?
What's the photographer's preference?
I know that typically the way the Board of Supervisors might handle it would be to assemble over on this side and have a picture coming down long way.
Sounds good to me. Let's do that. Does that sound workable for y'all? Okay. So that takes care of our. So that wraps up agenda item, what was it, 4C? That was our last one. So we'll move on to public comment. Any members of the public? Yes.
More of a question than a comment. Since we have new board members, I'd like to let you know we do have a Meet the Board section on our website. And if you could email me a brief bio, how you would like your name presented, and if you have a headshot that you like, over to me, and I can give you my card afterwards. Then we will get that posted and also update our chair listing as well, since that has changed today as well. That's all.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Do we have anybody on the phone who's joined us?
There are no callers on the line at this time.
Thank you. Anybody in the room? Going once, going twice. Okay. And with that, we'll close the meeting. Meeting's adjourned, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.